Howdy everybody. Welcome back to Passion Theory, where I share with you some of my passions, and this one's is spooky things. I love spooky things, mostly because I had a lot of spooky things happen to me. My mom apparently had a lot of spooky things happen to her. My grandmother had a lot of spooky things happen to her. My brothers had a lot of spooky things happen to him. Our friends who are around us have had spooky things happen to them. My husband's had spooky things happen to him. So yes, I think the only one who has not had any spooky things happen to them so far is my son, and that's because I have many ways to make sure spooky things stay far away from him. So, all right. So, let us see here. So I was still on my mom's stories. I don't know why my eyes might be like leaking. It's just there's like smoke and stuff in the air right now. So, it's just allergies. So no, I'm not crying. I'm not crying or anything, I promise. So let me get started with some more spooky stories. All right. So, previously I had mentioned that Charlie, who's actually like my great-grandfather's spirit, or we assume it is a spirit who watches over the family, especially the kids. And I said I would have stories about how they that spirit literally saved our lives or helped us in some way and things like that. So here is an example of such things. So my mother was about, I think she said about 10 at the time, was walking with one of her friends in the neighborhood, and she felt like something grabbed the back of her shirt or jacket and like pulled her back a little bit and said, "Be careful," or "Stop," something like that. Remember, I'm remembering these stories. The last time I heard them, I was like 16 or 18. And I'm not gonna renew contact with my mom to get the full 100% story. You'll get the gist, and when I tell my stories, that we know that they're 100% accurate. But and so I can't remember if the friend she was with also had their jacket pulled from behind, or if my mom instinctively reached out and pulled her back too, but they both ended up being pulled back. And I can't remember if my mom was the only one who heard the voice or if the friend also heard the voice. But right after that happened and they both were pulled back, a giant tree branch just like fell in front of them where they would have been had they kept walking, and they would have been either killed or severely harmed. So that is one thing. Another thing is that this spirit is very interactive with that's another reason why we've kind of done like yes or no sessions. It answers to the name Charlie. It will occasionally move things around, either if you ask it to, or it will stop if you ask it to. And we'll get into more of that when we go into my stories. But for example, my dad did not ever believe in paranormal stuff. And even when he saw stuff that he could not deny, he would brush it off as like, oh, it's just something scientific that we don't understand yet. And an example of this is, it used to frustrate me to no end because in every other way, my father was a very good father. But when I would see something or say something, or he would see something with me, he would ignore it and just say, oh, that's whatever. We just don't know what it is. And it was very much like when you watch those scary movies, not movies, but like those like true ghost stories. You see the cat? Like, do you see her taking her little bath in the background there? Oh my gosh. She's trying to steal the show back there with her little white paws. You know, and like they go to the haunted house. They like, the family gets a great deal on like a haunted house, but they don't know it's haunted. And then, you know, it's like very stereotypical. The wife and the child start saying like, hey, it's haunted. And the husband's like, I don't believe you. And then the husband sees something and finally believes. And you're always like the whole time like, oh, this guy's a jerk, right? Like how could you dismiss their feelings even if you don't believe in it? And that was the one thing that my dad did a lot. And I think it's because like there's this whole thing about masculinity and being able to protect your family, and you can't protect them against something that's not physical. So in that case, you just deny its existence. I don't know. So my dad would definitely gaslight us that way. But here is a case where my mom was trying to prove to him what was going on. So they were dating at this point, or they were newly married. They were younger, probably younger than I am now. And they've been together for a very long time. They were sitting and like lying in bed. And I do believe it was before they even had kids. And I think it was at my grandfather's house, my mom's dad's house, where she grew up and stuff. But it could have been somewhere else. I don't know. I just remember the important part of the story is they were lying in bed and there was a chandelier in the room. And it started swaying back and forth. And when I mean swaying, it was going like, not like this, but it was going like this, right? All the way up almost to the ceiling on both sides, and just, but kind of slowly, like this, not like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And there was no wind or anything going on. And my dad was like, that's kind of weird. And my mom went, oh, that's just Charlie messing around. And he was like, no, I've told you that that's not real. It's just, there must be, like a vent or something that's running that's causing vibrations or something. And she's like, no, it's not. Watch, I'll show you. So remembers doing this. She says, I'll show you. And she goes, Charlie, stop that. And it stopped. The chandelier stopped like this. Like, here's the ceiling. It stopped like this, which there's no way it should stop like that, right? It should not stop straight horizontally like that. There's no way with gravity and stuff it should do that. And then my dad was just like kind of sitting there and she's like, Charlie, put it back. And it just went like this. It didn't go like this, like, and keep going back and forth like it should. It just went boop. Like someone had just like physically, and like the chain didn't shake or anything. And I think that was the only time my dad ever acknowledged that anything could be real. But yeah, so when I asked my dad about this, by the way, he just kind of was like, I don't know, I don't remember that, I don't know, and like would mumble and then like leave the room. Because frequently I'd be like, it is real, remember that one time? And he would be like, I don't know, and like just totally leave after mumbling uncomfortably. But he never straight out said like that didn't happen or anything. He'd be like, I don't know what gone. All right, so another thing that would happen to my mom was that when she lived in her childhood home, sometimes at night, now the windows on the house are like up by the roof. They didn't have like long windows like I have behind me. They had really small windows that were like this, and they're like up by the roof, right? And so they're like 9 feet up or so. I am recording. Would you like to be in the video? Here you go. Here she is. She's upset. I don't know why, but here she is. She's in the video. She has like one little white patch right here. She's mostly black though. Okay, there you go. Yeah, you're gonna just keep complaining. That's cool. Where was I? Okay, so the windows are like 9 feet up. And at night when she was sleeping alone in her room, she would hear scratching at the glass. Some nights, not every night, but she would hear scratching at the glass and something like saying her name in like this creepy, creepy voice. And she never looked out the window. Like she'd have to get up on top of something to look out the window. But she never looked up at the window. She never looked out the window, but she would get down like onto the ground and like army crawl out of her room. And she said that the sound and the scratching on the glass would follow her from room to room until she got into her mom's room. And she'd like wake her mom up or like sneak into bed with her mom, and it would stop whenever she got into the room with her parents or her mom. Because her dad usually worked graveyard, so he slept during the day for the most part. So That's creepy. I have had a weird scritchy window story, but a couple weird window things at the window stories. But again, I'll get to those when it's my turn for my stories, because they're not exactly the same. I told the story about the little girls because it was too much of a parallel. Let's see. About the woods, I have a list down here. About the woods that were around my mom's house. Now there's no woods. It all got cut down and developed. But when she was a kid, there was a lot of woods, and those woods were really, really weird. I will say they're in Florida, and they are around where this most recent, like where my mom lived, is around where this most recent hurricane hit. So there you go. It's like that area. And, so a couple of weird things about the woods are, like, she wasn't the only one in the family who thought that the woods felt oppressive or weird, and they would find strange things in the woods. I know 2 stories of her brothers that I do have is that one time one of them found a machete, which isn't strange, oddly enough. Finding a machete out in the woods isn't strange in that area, because if like a bunch of teenagers are running around out there and they want to make trails through the palmettos and stuff like that, you need a machete to cut through the undergrowth. I've actually, here where I live, which is kind of like, it's got a lot of blackberries and stuff like that. When I was a kid, I've actually found 3 machetes. And I kept them for quite a while. I hid them and kept them so I could make trails. So, you know, a bunch of 10-year-olds running around with machetes. In like the back trails and stuff. But yeah. So, finding a machete wasn't weird. But what was really weird was that it had a very long, thick bone handle. Like, and not like bone as in like it was like polished and smoothed out. It looked like a leg bone with like the little balls at the end and everything. And they assumed it was like a cow bone of some kind, but when my mom saw it or heard about it, she thought it seemed more like a femur bone, but of like a human. But you know, kids especially, are gonna throw everything out of proportion. So most likely it was like a cow or deer bone, but you know, kids. It could have even been an antler handle or something. Oh god, Kitty's got zoomies. But they found that in the woods. And then another thing that the older brothers found in the woods was they found what looked to be a shallow grave. There was like a pile of dirt that looked about the size of a person, and the dirt was disturbed there. And the boys, you know, this being back in the day and stuff, the boys decided, did you miss the ledge? There you go. The boys decided to like dig it up, like dig up the grave to see if there was a body, because you didn't like contact the sheriff and stuff unless you knew it was something. So they started undigging it. Like they went and got home and got shovels and they started undigging it, and then they just started getting like really, really like scared, and like it felt like something was watching them. The more they dug down, and so they started freaking out, and so they left it. It was 1 or 2 of her brothers. I can't remember if it was like 2 of her brothers, but I don't remember if they were together or if this happened like several times where a brother would discover this grave without the other brothers telling them and then start this whole process. But yeah. So they would dig it, and then they got freaked out. They left. And then like about a week or 2 later, they'd be like, okay, let's go, you know, they'd drink some beers or something and then get the bravery up, and they would go back. They went back to it to like, we're gonna do it this time. I would have just called like the police and been like, hey, this kind of looks like a shallow grave, you might want to check it out. But so then they went, and they went back to the grave area, and it was completely filled in, and it didn't look like anyone, like the dirt did not look like it still looked disturbed, like a shallow grave, but it didn't look like any digging had been done recently. Like their recent digging looked like it had been completely put back together, almost. And so they did it again, and they got down about like a foot, and they just couldn't handle it anymore. Like the feeling was getting worse and worse and worse. So they left. And this happened like 3 or 4 times where they would leave and get a little deeper each time. And when they came back, it looked immaculate. And then eventually, I can't remember if they just decided to leave it alone or if they forgot about it or what. But there was never an ending to that. I don't know if it was a shallow grave or not. So. And then the last thing I have about those woods and what I'll be ending today's one on is I don't remember if this was 2 of my mom's brothers or my brother and my cousin. Because it could be that my brother and my cousin told me this story or they were around. I heard this is one of the stories I didn't hear very often and I forgot about a lot of the times. So the last time I heard this story, I was probably like 12. So I'm sorry, the details are like meh. 2 young boys, whether it was my brother and my cousin or 2 of my mom's brothers, 2 young boys were up in a tree near the house. Because my parents lived with my grandpa in that house for a while with me. I was like 2 at the time. So it could have very well been my brother and my cousin because my cousin lived down the street. So I can't remember, honestly. But so 2 boys in my family were up in the tree. Like hanging out, making like they used to make like gorillas nests up in the top of the trees. Like, you know how if you've watched Nat Geo or something, gorillas will like weave branches to make nests up in the top of the trees. Well, they would do that and stuff like that. So they were up messing around in trees. And one of the boys saw like a black hand, like it looked like a shadow hand reaching towards the other boy and was like, "Hey, watch out." And if it was my brother, my cousin, I don't even remember in my mind which scenario, which one saw the hand and which one was attacked by the hand. And same with if it was my mom's brothers, I don't even remember which brothers it would be. So, but one of the boys said, "Hey, watch out," because they saw the hand. And then the boy who was near the hand grabbed his throat, and then the hand disappeared, but it was like still choking them invisibly. Went around their throat and like picked them up and then let them drop from the tree. And so they were fine. They ended up being fine. It wasn't very high up in the trees and they weren't really injured, but it was just freaky. And I can't remember if the boy who got attacked, if they could see the hand at the beginning or not. But yeah, creepy woods around the house. Very, very creepy woods. I have my own stories about the woods around that house. Even from the time I was 2, I have some memories from that house. And from the woods around that house. That's how my first memories are actually in that house. The very first memories I can remember in my life are from that house. So there we go. That is all the spooky stories I have for today. I have, I think, one more set of stories. And then I'm saving my mom's like scariest story she ever told me for last. In my mom's story saga. And then I will tell mine. All right. So they'll have a lot more details because I was there. Meow. All right. Remember to make room for your own passions and have a fun but safe spooky time. Bye for now.